Welcome to another episode of the Reboot Chronicles, a no-holds-barred forum with global leaders, authors, entrepreneurs, and CEOs about how organizations stay focused on growth and innovation in unprecedented times. I'm your host, Dean Tobias, coming to you live from Reviv's North American headquarters in Chicago, and we would like to thank you for joining us from around the globe today. I'd like to welcome Isabella Chick, who's the Managing Director for Retail and the Beauty sectors at Founders Factory. They've got accelerator and web studio programs that they run in New York and London and Paris and Johannesburg, headquartered out of London, of course. Isabella, welcome. It's good to see you.
Nice to see you too.
I was wondering, you're kind of right in our wheelhouse here in terms of what a lot of our viewers like to talk about, corporates and startups getting together. But maybe tell us about, the whole organization, Founders Factory. I think it's just a cool name. And is it? Are you in the center of London? Where are you guys?
Yeah, well, we're in Kensington, which probably isn't like traditionally like a startup hub in London. We're in sort of genteel West London.
Right.
We were founded about 5 years ago now, with a goal of building and accelerating 200 startups, and we're just about there. And now the ambition is to get to like 2,000. So I'm not sure where it'll be if we catch up next year. But we were founded 5 years ago with 6 core kind of corporate partners who wanted to deploy capital into startups and work with the startups. That's a really important part. So I guess kind of startup corporate partnership is a kind of cornerstone of our model. And we support existing startups through the accelerator, and we also build startups from scratch in our venture studio.
All right, so let's dig into that. We'll get into the numbers later on, because sometimes it's a numbers game, but sometimes it's not. So you've broken it up in accelerator and venture studio. There's other groups that have done similar things to that in Chicago, Silicon Valley, all around the world. Why did you take that approach? You have 2 founders that pretty much, I guess that was their idea. So maybe start with the accelerator first. You're focused on verticals. We'll talk about yours, of course, today. But how does the accelerator work? Is it different from others?
So the accelerator, it is a bit different from others in that we actually don't have an accelerator program. We don't run cohorts, and we have an enormous operating team. So I think that does make us a bit different from most people. Whether it was mad or a good idea, well, only time will tell. But
most people don't say enormous operating team. Usually says overhead. But I know you told me that you've got like 100 people. I assume some of those are people like me, volunteer mentors, advisors.
We actually have no mentors or advisors.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's awful. So that's very different. That's putting your money where your mouth is. I like that.
Super hands-on support, actual lots of doing rather than mentoring and coaching. We roll up our sleeves and get in the weeds of stuff. So our team is everything from growth marketing to product design, data science, basically everything that a well-funded startup, all of the functions a well-funded startup would love to have, but can so rarely afford to have at the very earliest stages. Exactly. So we hire those people and enable our startups to work with them. So ideally, we're kind of getting in the weeds, getting everything kind of moving, showing by doing, essentially, is what we like to say. And hopefully, after 6 months of working with us, the startup is on a better trajectory than they were when they started.
And what does your track record look like? I guess first of all, how many startups? So you said you don't do the normal cohort model.
No, but we do deploy capital quite systematically. So we do invest. We've got this kind of sector model, and we invest in 5 startups on the accelerator every year. Yep. But they all start at the right time for the startup and for us, and they work with us for 6 months. But they don't follow. There's no kind of prescribed path through this.
You don't kick them out, as we say.
Some people, well, we don't kick them out, but also some people, some people maybe have like a huge focus on growth marketing if it's like a direct-to-consumer brand. Others might be a much deeper focus on kind of product and data science. So we run completely bespoke programs for each business.
Yeah, of course. So roughly how many have been through over the last few years?
Well, so this year, 68 startups have come through.
Wow.
Um,
Technical term. Wow.
yeah.
Well, I just know how much work it is, but
Yeah, no,
you guys have scaled
we've
it, which
been,
is
we've been,
impressive.
well, I mean, we've scaled it, but not by doing things that are particularly scalable. So we've just worked really hard this year.
Oh gosh, that's like the story of my
But,
life. Yes.
but we're still looking for that secret sauce of figuring out how to do this properly, to do it scalably, not properly. I think we probably cracked how to do it properly. How to do it scalably is probably our real challenge.
And you focused on 8 verticals, is that right?
Eight
You've got
verticals.
wow.
Yeah, so these are our kind of.
Normally, I'd say having verticals is a good focus, but 8 is like I don't know. That's a lot of verticals.
It's a lot of verticals. So we've got kind of managing directors that come in and run kind of one or two of these. And I'm very lucky that mine are fairly complementary, that I run retail and beauty sectors. So there's an awful lot of kind of e-com enablers and businesses that are kind of enabling both sectors to thrive. But yes, it is essentially we've got a lot of really smart generalists,
Yep.
some of which have got more of a kind of B2B bias, some have got B2C, but even though we invest in beauty, we're not necessarily investing in like beauty products. It might be like AI MarTech solutions that aren't necessarily kind of beauty investments, but are really important for the beauty sector to succeed.
In general, yeah, of course. So before we jump into that, let's touch on the other part of the operation, which is a venture studio. What's going on there? What's the flow like?
The flow there, again, we deploy capital quite systematically. So we build 2 businesses per sector per year. And we have 2 ways of working. Sometimes we come up with some crazy ideas of a business that we think needs to be there, partly because we get fantastic insight from working with our corporate partners. And over the course of years, obviously from the kind of broader ecosystem, we hope that we have quite good kind of early signals on the market. And other times we work with founders who have a concept or a very early business that they want to build, and we work with them over the course of a year. We invest £250,000 into developing that product, and a year of full-on support. So hopefully seeing them through to that kind of pre-seed raise at the end of it. But equally, some have gone straight to Series A. So
if I'm in the venture studio versus your accelerator, I'm gonna get more access to resources and more shoulder behind me, as we say.
yeah, I mean it's a slightly different kind of commercial offer. We'll take a little bit more of the cap table there,
Yep.
but these are we do see ourselves as kind of co-founders in that kind of first year of the business.
Brilliant. If you look across the accelerator and I'll make it easy for you, and the venture studio, what are some of your favorite startups that you've launched? Maybe not in your sector. Let's start with ones that aren't in yours.
So there's one we have, despite being kind of sector focused, we do occasionally decide to do what we call a cross-sector business. So where we'll kind of double up investment where we think we can get kind of super linear returns. We have built a really ambitious business in this space, a business called Nate, that has created a kind of universal checkout. So in a world where if you're a publisher and you have in a particular feature products from 5 different brands on one site, you wouldn't send a person to 5 different websites to complete the transaction individually. So you could have a kind of universal basket. So that's been quite crazy and fun. We're just starting to build one in synthetic media at the moment, which I'm really excited about. Trying to create kind of purpose-driven characters for the metaverse.
It's different.
And we've been doing an awful lot in, I mean, a lot of investments that I'm closest to around kind of interactive commerce, which we have kind of taken quite a deep series of bets in on the venture studio as well as on the accelerator. So kind of an area that we're investing in heavily.
So let's jump into some of your corporate partners. We run a program out of Chicago called Dancing with Startups. We bring it's like been going on for over a decade, right? Bringing some of the largest corporations together with startups all around the world, accelerate growth. And so everyone has pretty much copied that. You seem to have taken it to an interesting level, and I've gotten some pretty good reviews. How's the program work, and who are some of your partners maybe to start out with? Just give everybody an idea.
So I mean, maybe talking about my experience specifically
Sure.
is I work on the beauty sector with L'Oréal,
Hmm.
and we are the sort of main accelerator and venture studio program that they run. And we work very, very closely with the UK team, but our stakeholders are ultimately in the kind of global Paris team, or the global team based in Paris
Yep.
that looks after innovation globally. So we do have good reach across the world, really, for those businesses, and we've enabled, I think, over 200 pilots with L'Oréal for the beauty startups. So that's been fantastic. And on the retail side, we work with Marks and Spencers in the UK. And they also have been a fantastic partner to our startups.
Hmm.
And the way that they work with us is really, we've become almost like an extension, a kind of, we're another string to that kind of innovation bow. They normally have lots of other kind of partnership, and in some cases, like L'Oreal's got a corporate venture capital arm. They also run a program with Station F, which is equity free. So we're kind of one part of this ecosystem.
Hmm.
But we do find that we get quite good results where we build really close relationships at the kind of at the executive levels, but also at the working levels, which is really critical. We have secondees come and join our startups occasionally, about 2 a year from L'Oreal, and 1 a year from Marks and Spencers. And that really it enables a very close kind of cultural exchange between the organizations, where hopefully we enable their team to be upskilled and properly learn what it's like to work at a startup and develop kind of proper empathy and some new skills and how to move quite scrappily and quickly.
Yeah. We call that the rub-off effect. Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
It works. It works in some companies.
And yeah, but I suppose, we've got kind of just good relationships across the board, with all the different teams that we're working with. So whenever we start investing in a new area, we have to start building the relationships with all the relevant stakeholders, so that we're really able to understand their pain points, because that helps us make better investments.
Yeah.
And it also enables us to set expectations and priorities right, so that we're pushing the right pilots at the right time, saving hopefully quite a lot of headache for both startup and corporate if they're kind of not matched quite right. And rather than just doing matching, we actually then go and shepherd the whole kind of pilot process, set the KPIs, ensure that we've got really, that everyone knows what good looks like, how to measure it, take startups through the very painful procurement process, try and enable corporates to make that process a little bit more startup friendly. I mean, it's really kind of soup to nuts. Anything that we can do to enable that collaboration, we will do.
Right. Right. You're a perfect translator, but you also get the work done with them for them. And what's the commitment from the corporates typically? How's the program work for them? They're investing capital, time, money, resources,
All
showing
of the
you their.
above.
Yep.
All of the above. It's fairly involved from their part. It's not a kind of light touch. Come to a demo day once,
Yeah.
once a year. They
The,
sit on the investment committee.
the
They have a say
demo
on the
day petting
investments
zoo
that they
phase.
make.
Sometimes that gets them started, though.
um, so yeah, I mean, I think we try and avoid doing any sort of showcase that doesn't result in actual business development from the startups or some value exchange, because I think it can just become a sort of a piece of corporate entertainment, which we try and avoid, because I don't think that's valuable for anyone actually. But what we do is we engage startups ahead of the businesses that we invest in. They have a votes at the investment committee equal to ours. And at that point, we define who do we think is going to be kind of the best businesses to solve kind of immediate pain points, in which case there's really clear kind of pilot opportunities, which ones might benefit initially from kind of more of a kind of mentoring and insight-based relationship, and then move into a commercial relationship. So it's kind of just trying to be really clear at the start with what everyone should be expecting from the relationship, which means that we can be quite open in terms of saying, actually, in some cases, we're just interested in keeping an eye on a particular market, or we think it's a really strong founder, and from a financial return perspective, we just want to make the investment. And in other cases, it's super strategic, and they may even do a follow-on round from their corporate venture capital arm. So we enable all kind of formats of collaboration.
Right. And how many beauty retail startups have you brought into the program?
So if we do 5 a year per sector, we're on our 5th year on beauty, so 25 startups we've invested in.
So no crazy numbers. It's more about quality, it sounds like.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's it's difficult to tell because everyone's got a slightly different kind of view of what kind of crazy numbers look like.
Well, when you said 2,000, we're going to come back to that because that's a bit much, I think. But
2,000,
we'll end up on that one. Your future goals. So tell us about some of the beauty tech and or maybe the mix. What are some of the targets and mix when you look at the retail health, beauty, and wellness as we categorize it at Revive? What's your lens look like? What have you brought in so far categorically, and what are you looking for in terms of startups and categories?
So in terms of categories, I think anything that makes the customer experience more engaging, more personalized, is always really appealing. So I think anything from kind of mass customization to sort of bringing in a service layer to an e-com journey, whether that's kind of skin diagnostics, or hair diagnostics. We just built a really interesting business which is going to launch in January called Cara, which is enabling that people with textured hair to get hair coaching in order to enable their hair to go natural and to look after it properly, because there's a real dearth of education in the community, and then enable them to get kind of reach their kind of ideal hair goals. So that's super interesting. I'm also very interested in any businesses that enable us to target a new channel in a different way. So we've built one called Expertly, which is enabling kind of freelance beauty professionals to earn money from the recommendations they already make in order to provide a better service to their customers. So that one's really interesting. Anything around kind of interactive commerce, group buying is sort of interesting. And I'm quite interested in kind of how the affiliate networks are going to evolve in the future. So can you create kind of affiliate networks for kind of physical space? Can you create sort of new business models and incentives there? So I think, those are sort of areas I'm personally very interested in. But equally, if we find some really interesting kind of deep tech approach to, using a technology in a different way to solve a kind of beauty or retail thing, then I think that's fascinating.
Yeah, it's been a lot of spikes in demand with a global lockdown going on for, about a year now. The consumer behavior shift has been just so dramatic. So Revive has a health, beauty, wellness index that measures all these spikes in demand, many of them up like 400%, 400, depending on what the categories they're searching. But personalization, skincare is up versus cosmetics kind of shifting to not as important. Everything.
There's quite nowhere to go. I mean, I think cosmetics is going to make a huge comeback. I reckon there's a massive pent-up demand for luxury and glamour and parties and socializing.
Yeah, it's a good question. What are some of the temporary shifts you think for retail, and which ones are more long-term? What are your thoughts there?
I mean, I think like the really short-term stuff is how do you make like your retail space COVID safe? Like how can you get somebody in through the door? And encourage them to come in and make them feel safe when they're doing it. So whether that's like lots of click and collect, it's that kind of hybrid approach between kind of e-com and retail, and still using your kind of physical retail footprint to work for you and maybe upsell in store. But I think longer term, I just don't know that people are going to stop buying online now that they've been forced to, and they've had like a year of this being their dominant behavior. I just don't think there's any going back from that. So how do you use that store space effectively to create, to sell differently, to create a different experience? And how do you start to kind of empower those really brilliant, smaller local retailers to do a good job?
Which has been a big problem. I'll just give you the U.S. Maybe not the stats because that would take too long, but two trends that are troubling. It's Amazon, Walmart, Target, other big box guys. They're so happy because everything's off the chart. We just had Walmart on before you, and I'm like, yeah, great, but small businesses crushed. Another interesting trend, though, that doesn't get talked about a lot is called consolidated buying. So therefore, if I go to one of those big box stores, I'm trying to get as much as I can and get the heck out of there, as we say, and load up my truck and go home. However, even companies like Walgreens are suffering because thousands of stores all over the place, and Boots obviously in the UK.
Yeah.
But they are suffering from the consumer bundling behavior because they're more specialty. People would run in and get stuff at these. They're almost like a little store. So it's one of the bigger categories that's been affected. But the small business and startups and all of that, it's been a tremendous blow, but it sure hasn't slowed down investment, has it?
Well, I mean, look at kind of Shopify's doing brilliantly. So there are independents doing super well.
Yeah, ShopRunner, one of our friends in Chicago, they just are going to get bought up by FedEx. But that's more e-commerce-y kind of, targeting stuff. A lot of that going on. So it's definitely, I mean, you're right. It's definitely shifted behavior. It's going to be, it's blown up the word omni-channel once and for all. It's like, hey, it's no matter where you are, but there's still a lot of stores that they don't know when you're in store. They know when you're online, but they don't always know when you're in store unless they force you to use the app in store, which some people find irritating. Whereas you've got something like a Revive, skin diagnostics app, or take your pick there, where there's a reason for somebody to use something in store, but many consumers don't necessarily want to whip out their phone just to check out. It's just like, so I think we've got a long way to go on the omnichannel front. I guess. Are you seeing some opportunities there?
Yeah, I think there'll still be a long way to walk because it's a big shift in consumer behavior, and that's always going to take longer to change than startup ideas are to come. So, where do we feel comfortable as consumers? Like, what are the changes in behavior that we can make and that we'll accept in the near term? I don't know. It feels like you've got to walk a line between the convenience of e-com and the experience of retail, and anything that doesn't provide either an experience or convenience is going to fall short. So I think that's the piece to think about. There's an awful lot of things you could be doing with in-store technology, but if they're not really providing a better customer experience, honestly, it's just not going to be used. What's the point?
Point. Unless there's a good benefit, like in the States, they force a lot of people to use it for their loyalty points or whatever we want to call it.
Exactly.
And that's a good benefit for many customers, not all. So yeah, it depends what the experience is. Is it engagement? Is it shopping cart size? But just getting consumers in 21 and 22 to stop the bundling and stop the consolidated buying, and it at least in this country, I think it's going to take a little while, and eventually they'll be happy to go out. Whereas in the UK, you've got more of the shops mentality.
There's a bit more. Well, it's just a different fabric of the cities, right? I think there's kind of there's more of a top-up shop kind of mentality, even for your grocery shopping. There's slightly different patterns, but I think there's an awful lot actually that big box retailers can be doing to work with independent brands to both drive kind of interest and footfall within their stores, and I think there's going to be, in the same way as we see a lot of startup corporate collaboration working really well. I think the next part that we're going to see in kind of the retail sector is going to be around kind of independent brand and large retailer, maybe not Walmart, but maybe somebody that's larger and can provide some of the great kind of distribution and data and access and customer acquisition channels for these smaller brands.
Right. So Walmart is doing that now, very much like Amazon, like
Yeah.
selling through smaller providers of
Yeah.
products. Also working with startups all over the globe to try to accelerate growth and things. So you're working with Marks and Spencer. So will you bring a lot of these brands to them and to get them in store and channel? I'm sure you're bringing them e-com solutions and all the boring tech stuff, but on the
Yeah,
consumer product side, is much of that
we've
going
done.
on, or?
I mean, we've done it once actually, only with them because they generally stock their own brand.
Yeah.
They're quite a peculiar kind of grocer and retailer in that they're
Mhm.
both brand and retailer. Um, and they go from food all the way to kind of home and fashion. But we did manage to get a dog food brand invested in and stocked there within 6 weeks, which was a good result.
That's
Um,
fantastic.
but I think,
6 months
it's
to
like
ever.
no, exactly. So I mean, it is, it does a testament to how speedily they can move. But I think it's harder for some big retailers to work with independent brands on their kind of core ranges. So who were really lucky, it was kind of pet food. They were looking to kind of refresh that range. Consumer behaviors shifted a lot there, and their kind of product assortment didn't quite line up. So we had a great opportunity. Um, but generally, it's a little bit harder to get brilliant kind of venture returns on some kind of product brands who probably are looking for slightly different types of capital.
Yeah, I love how you put that so subtly. Um, so tell us about personalization, especially in beauty and skincare, and a lot of activity going on there. A lot of
Well, I
retailers
mean,
trying to make a difference.
look at Function of Beauty's raise last week or 2 weeks ago that was just announced, $150 million for personalized hair care. So that is certainly a sign that customers really like it. And I think we're just kind of tip of the iceberg at the moment. It's kind of pick what, a little bit on the formulation, a lot on the kind of color and experience and label on the bottle. So I think there's an awfully long way to go on personalization down to like what the actual like depth of the formulation is going to be for any product.
Right.
And I think we're just at the kind of tip of the iceberg here. The things that we're starting to see in kind of skincare will be typically like a particular retinol concentration and kind of taking people through a journey on that, whether it's for kind of acne or wrinkle care. For hair care, it'll be kind of the right quantity of kind of conditioning ingredients, um, and then kind of level of fragrance that you like. But it's still quite light personalization. There's an awfully long way to go. And I'm excited to see where that goes because I think that does start to change the way that the industry as a whole works. It
Right.
becomes much more one-to-one rather than kind of mass products to the many.
How do startups get into your program? You said, you're talking like a couple hundred. You're thinking of expanding that maybe tenfold, which is a bit
Well,
mind-boggling. But if you're not in the physical space, genre as much anymore, I guess it's easier to scale. But
how did they go?
what
I
did they
guess
do? Do they just call you and you let them in now? Or
so. We speak to startups all year round. We probably
sure.
accept, I think, just under 1% of people that apply.
Whoa, that's not very
Um,
encouraging to the viewers. Give them some
um,
tips. How should they improve that
but I
percentage?
think the startups that we take on the accelerator have product in market
Hmm?
and some sense of proposition market fit. Not necessarily yet at kind of proper product market fit, but proposition market fit. The people that are using it really like it, even if it's a small number. That we're starting to get really good customer feedback. Because I think that's the only way of knowing whether you're going in the right direction, right?
Right.
So anything that you can kind of prove around the way that you're building your product, the way you're listening to your clients, and the fact that they like it, and that it meets a fundamental need. And then obviously the kind of, I suppose more obvious things of like, is this a big problem to solve? Is there a big market opportunity, or are you going after a very, very niche and small market? In which case, we'd probably ask you to kind of zoom out a little bit and see if there's a bigger problem to tackle. But we speak to startups the whole time, and we bring them to an investment committee when we think they're ready. So there are businesses that we kind of keep an eye on for a long time. And once we think they've got a good chance of getting to investment committee, then we bring them and prepare them for that and everything. So we do look to build quite long-term relationships with founders.
Right. Perfect. Well, that sounds good. Isabella, I have so many more things to ask you, but our time is up. I appreciate you coming on and love the Founders Factory story, and look forward to hearing more about you in the future as you guys grow.
Great. Thank you very much for having me on, Dean. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Yeah, cheers. Merry Christmas.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.